Hey guys, listen, it's taken me a little bit to think about the story, you know, where to start, and decided we're going to wait and do the childhood trauma when my sister can be on here and we'll talk about our childhood and the things that have happened there. So I thought, well, I'll go ahead and start out with the domestic violence that from, adulthood, being in a relationship with someone that, you chose to be in a relationship with, right? And I'm not going to go into too many details on this, and it has been a hard one to even think about coming on and talking about it. Because it did happen so many years ago, and I try to really forget about a lot of it. So having to sit there and talk about it and really think through it has been kind of like, ooh. But it is I think it is important for people to talk about it and tell, okay, well, what's happened in your life? There are people still going through it that have not gotten out, who may just be getting into a relationship like that, and the red flags that pop up, and we try and tell ourselves that they're not. You'll have to excuse me. I do not have my hair done. I have my hat on. No makeup. It's alright. I don't usually wear makeup. I'm home with the kids, If I go to work, I'll try to gussy up a little bit, but, this is what you get right here. This is me and Odalia out here. Mine started 18 years old. First red flag probably should have been when I found out, when I asked him how old he was, and he lied to me about it. And he's like, oh, well, I just don't even keep track, right? Well, 18, found out he was 13 years older than me. So that made him 31. When you're 18, you think you know everything, and that, you don't really realize everything's rose-colored glasses, And, starts out 18 years old, and first thing is he was in the military and would leave on deployment and left me there without a car. And I was pregnant and got pregnant pretty early on. So, was left pregnant, home by myself, no vehicle, in a bad neighborhood. My mom wasn't very happy about it, but I just thought, it's okay. It's not that big of a deal. I'll get a car later, whatever. But we had a car, and he locked it and wouldn't let me have the keys. So, okay. That's kind of a red flag. And then, the next progression is he divides you from your friends and family. Yeah, that's a huge red flag. When they want to separate you from them, separate you from your support system. And had the opportunity to move because he was in the military. So we did. We moved all the way from Virginia down to Florida. And guess what? I knew nobody down there. And, that's kind of the way they like to have it, I guess. And yeah, I smoke, guys. But, just, one thing leads to the next. And, there was a lot of things happened and a lot of issues here and there. And like I said, I'm not going to go and tell, day by day, because I don't remember day by day, and I don't want to remember day by day. I remember some of the bigger things that happened, and I remember some of the smaller things too. But on a daily, I know that my life turned into pretty much a living hell, okay? Starting off by, can't simple as things like painting the house or, decorating. None of that was allowed. Clean the house, but he comes home and there's a glass and a spoon in the sink and he goes ballistic. And there's certain things, over the years, because I was in this relationship for 5 years, which, that's 5 years too long, but that's not near as long as what some people go through. Some people stay a lot longer. And these are just little things that, just kind of shows the progression of the controlling. I had a baby, I had gained weight, and I still had a lot less pounds than what I have now. I would give anything to be that size again. And, he had me thinking I was fat and grotesque and not worth anything, you know, and get you under their thumb, you know. I was stupid. Nothing, you know, all that kind of stuff that someone who's controlling and, well, hello. Well, there, he's gone again, the dog. But, there were so many things that happened. There were things, you know, pulling a gun out on you, throwing you up against the wall and choking you, locking you out of the house and actually putting furniture in front of the door all the way to the wall so that you couldn't open the door. There wasn't enough furniture to do it to the side door, though, you know? Things like that, that when you stop and you look back on it, you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that I allowed that for myself, that I allowed that for my children, because I had children. There was 2 of them before I left. And, you know I had left one time because things were really rough. And I had left and I had come home to my mom, and this was 3.5 years into it, when I finally was just like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Again, there were a lot of things that happened, but they weren't, and I actually, one of my mom's stipulations was you have to go into a domestic violence support group. And I did, and I thought, and I remember even telling the lady, I shouldn't be here. You know, she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, he's never actually hit me. He's never left a bruise. He's living there, you know. It was, in my mind, if he didn't have a bruise on me, then I'm not really, you know, a victim of domestic violence. Even though everything else was very violent. There was a lot of things that happened that shouldn't have. And that if they happened to my children now, I would be screaming mad. I would, yeah, you know. But what you accept for yourself, I guess, is at that time in my life was different. And I remember her telling me, you know, with all this stuff that he's done, oh, he will hit you. Didn't want to believe it. Just, you know, didn't look at it like I was a domestic violence victim at all. That there's just no way. He didn't punch me. He didn't leave bruises, no mark. I mean, and they're like, yeah, he choked you. And I was like, yeah, my neck was red, but it went away. It didn't mark me. Crazy things that you tell yourself, you know? And then I went back. I left, but I didn't stay gone. And I went back. And again, what I accepted for myself and for my children, to me, that's my guilt. That's unexcusable. I should have never allowed that for my kids. You know? It's okay, because I finally got out. But when I went back, that was when the beating started. And the first one was not even at home. It was in a public parking lot in the car with my 2 kids in the back seat. And people witnessing it. And that was a hard one. You know, I remember my kids got out of their seats so fast. I was trying to get out as fast as I could. He just continued. You know, I had a guy come up in a van, and I thought, I don't know, this guy in a van, you know, kind of creepy, right? You know, I probably shouldn't have feared him any more than I feared my husband. And he was like, are you okay? I saw what happened. Do you need help? And I was like, oh, no, I'm fine. It's okay. Thank you. You know, the truth was, yeah, I needed help. I didn't know what to do. Yeah, so, you know, that's when the actual landing of the fist, it started then. And that was right towards the end, where I said, I'm out. That was really close to the end. There, the last interactions that I had with him was a pretty bad night. It was a bad night, and he had a gun that he had up on the shelves, and I looked at it, and he saw me looking at it. He stepped in front of me. He was like, oh, you reach for that, I'll beat the shit out of you. Okay, I know, you will. So then I turned to go to the phone, call 911. And then he says, I'll beat the shit out of you the whole time you're on the phone. Okay. My mom's response to that was, well, honey, I would have just let him beat me. Just call 911. And I said, oh, no. Because I knew at that point he was so enraged. And if you've been in the situation and you've been with someone who is like that, then you know the point they're at. And he was so enraged because he hadn't beat me bad enough to where I had to go to the hospital or anything, you know. None of it was okay, but I didn't have to go to the hospital. But he was so enraged that I knew if I had called 911 that night, I would end up in the hospital, if not just beaten to death on the floor. He was so full of rage. So I went that night and I laid my kids back down to bed because during the whole thing, my kids get up crying, and laid them down and I slept on the floor in between their beds. And that was the last time we had any kind of interactions, and I laughed and I stayed gone that time. It was hard, and it was not hard because, so many people use the excuse or the reason they say that women stay is because they fear they can't make it financially without them. Okay? No. No, 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 no. This is not always correct. I never thought I can't make it without him. My thought was I didn't want to make it without him, right? Because that's supposed to be your husband. You're supposed to love him. You're supposed to stay married. I did not want to be divorced. As crazy as that sounds. Divorce was taboo. It was a bad thing. You weren't supposed to get divorced. And I always played that mind game with myself saying, one day he'll stop. One day he won't do this anymore. And we'll look back on this and almost have a laugh about it and say we had such a rough start, but we made it through. That wasn't going to happen. It didn't happen. Sorry, and then, you have people in your life during that time that I'll never forget. This one girl, I used to think she was a friend of mine, but after she said this is just not a friend. A friend would never say that to you. She tried to use God as a weapon on that. And she said, God wouldn't want you to divorce your husband. And I am very grateful that at the time, I was quick enough to think, and I just looked at her and I said, excuse me? God doesn't want me to divorce my husband? I said, well, I don't think God intends for me to be a punching bag for him either. And that's true, So when you're in that kind of situation, for someone to throw God at you like that, I just thought, wow, that's pretty messed up, And it is. It really was. I am grateful that I left when I did, eventually. And like I said, my guilt is that I actually stayed, that I went back, that I allowed myself to be under his thumb like that. How could I do that? How could I have let myself get in that situation? How could I allow someone to make me feel so little about myself? I don't know. That's, it's a hard one. How could I allow that for my children? That's the worst one. Your kids don't deserve that. They don't deserve to see any of that. They don't deserve to have to go through that. But I am very grateful. 5 years was enough. I had enough of it and said, it's over, it's done. But the games that I think I played with myself, just not wanting to be divorced, it was just crazy, Of course, I look back at it now and think it was crazy, but I also thought it was crazy that it was okay for him to pull a gun and to slam you up against the walls and, to choke you and, things like that. But because it wasn't an actual punch and bruises, that it wasn't domestic violence. I don't know. Anybody else think that? Is it just me? What you allow for yourself. It's crazy. Totally crazy. Insane. Really, when I think about how dysfunctional that was in my head, that's something. But, there's a lot of things that happened in between. We've been talking almost daily for 5 years. There was crap that went on, crap that was done that shouldn't have been done and said, and, just, and he did have a horrible drinking problem. even though they say drinking is a smokescreen for it, that the abuse is still there whether they're drinking or not. The drinking allowed him to snap off a lot quicker and a lot faster. You know, I mean, I couldn't even have a phone conversation with my mom without something happening. You know, there was twice. There was one time he had my son and he had him up in the air and he was yelling at him because he had touched his ham radio. And I'm freaking out. I throw the phone and I, run to go get him. And my mom's on there screaming, I'm calling 911, Crap like that. Like, you can't even have a phone conversation, Another time I was on the phone with our dog that had been given to us, who was pregnant and we didn't know. She had just had pups and she was trying her best to get out that back door. And, the door comes in. So she's trying to go and I'm trying to open it. She had to go so bad that she wasn't backing up. So I was trying to get her to back up so I could let her out. Well, she didn't make it out in time and she started to go inside. Okay, she just had babies. It's no fault of her own, And again, I'm on the phone with my mom and I have to throw the phone down because why? He has his steel-toed work boots on and goes over and proceeds to kick her repeatedly out the door. This is the kind of person we're dealing with, Like, yeah, it's very disturbing, and I don't like to think about it all the time, I really, because it was so many years ago for me. I'm not that person anymore. My poor husband now, poor guy, he's had to really kind of pay for that. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you're not going to talk to me like that. Don't treat me like this. If this ever happens, da-da-da-da-da, and he's like, whoa, what are you talking about, when you go through that, and these things happen, and, I'm just like, now I'm like, oh no, I'm too headstrong, too bully, too much of a bull with horns on, that kind of thing. Like, I will never be in that situation again. I will never accept that for my children ever again. And no one should live like that, And it's a lot easier for me to talk about that, I think, because it was my choice to marry him. It was my choice to be with him. It was my choice to keep going back when I shouldn't have. And like I said, I have guilt over that, major guilt on that for my children's sake. That's the hard part, So this was, it was my choice, regardless of the why. Because why do you stay in a abusive relationship? For so long I stayed because, again, I thought, crazily enough, he hadn't punched me and didn't leave a mark. So, we could make, and I always just thought, we'll make it through. It'll be okay. It'll be all right. Well, it wasn't okay. And so, like I said, 5 years too long. And again, a lot of things in between there. A lot of things in between there. But I would never accept for myself today. I would not accept for my children today. At all. A lot of red flags. A lot of things that happen. But you come out on the other side and, hey, I've got a good life now, I have a wonderful husband, I have wonderful children. They are so sweet and so loving, and my boys know you don't lay a hand on a woman, you don't do this and that, My girls know you don't do that to a man, but, also know what's not acceptable for them to treat you, man or woman. Domestic violence goes both ways. Unfortunately, my 2 older kids had to learn firsthand the do's and the don'ts. And that was my fault. So, I'm glad to be out of that relationship, of course. I'm really, really glad to be on the other side, and I'm really glad to know my value and to know what I'm worth it. Everybody is. Of course, I look like crap tonight, but that's okay, guys. I clean up nicely. But in all seriousness, it's a very hard topic and to discuss anyways, and I think a lot of people don't want to hear about it because they do think you had complete control over that. You could have walked away. Well, unless you're in that situation, you just don't know. You don't know what somebody's thinking. You don't know why they're not walking away, why they're not getting away, why did they keep going back. And I just hope and I pray that those who are in a bad relationship, even if they haven't actually punched you and left a mark, the emotional abuse, mental abuse, is just as bad as the physical abuse. So I just pray that anyone who's going through it, get out. Get out while you can. Your life will be so much better, and I promise you, there's a light at the end of that. And you will be so much happier afterwards. You don't have to live that way, and you deserve better. If you have children, your children deserve better. Anybody who has gone through that, I pray for I pray for you to, that you're healing and to know you will get through it. It's going to be great. And on that note, guys, I'm going to call it a night. It's late and I'm tired. Thank you for listening. Bye, guys.